Yeah, so good evening. We all set? It's okay? Maybe. Uh, yeah, perfect. We can do from here. Okay. Everyone can hear me crystal clear at home? Hugo, all okay? Yeah, okay. Also, yeah, sorry, people here also. Good evening. I have to pay some attention to people online in a moment. Yeah, so welcome this evening, second evening on the third evening on mind training, right? Yes, the second evening on mind training, and we did 3 evenings on bodhicitta. And then next model will be emptiness or wisdom, I think it's, or emptiness, yeah. So before we start, make sure you have the correct motivation for the continuity of the mind training. So think we're here together for a particular purpose, and that is to train our mind in the stage of path to enlightenment. And the motivation for that is, of course, bodhicitta. And what does that mean? That means to try to generate a wish to eliminate the suffering of all sentient beings without exception, and to achieve a state of enlightenment for that purpose. Yeah, that's kind of the traditional motivation you can generate, or you think you want to be a better human being and help others to achieve the same. It's kind of a secular or universal motivation. So yeah, generate either of those 2 motivations before we start. And then imagine in front Sakyamuni Buddha, surrounded by the masters of India, Tibet, and the other Buddhist traditions, and surrounding yourself countless beings undergoing individual sufferings, and then think how wonderful it would be if you can help them, how wonderful it would be if you can liberate them, and you take that kind of direction or responsibility with leading them in the prayers. You think you lead them by reciting the prayers, you lead them to the levels of liberation and enlightenment. Yeah.
To the founder, the entire transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond the flow of strength, the completely perfected for the waking being, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, Sagata, know the world, supreme guide human beings to attain. Teach your gods and beings to you, the completely and fully one, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the secure from the shackle cloud, prostrate, make offerings of refuge. To the founder, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond the flow of strength, the completely perfected fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, Sagata, supreme guide of human beings. Teacher of gods and beings, to you the complete and fully awakened one, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, subdue from the psychic land, prostrate and go for refuge. To the founder, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond the flow of destroyer, the complete, perfect, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sagata, know the world, the being guide of human beings to attain. Teacher of gods and human beings, to you the complete and fully awakened one, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, subdue from the psychic land, and prostrate and make offerings and go for refuge. The invisible, inconceivable, and inexpressible perfection of produced unseen in the nature of space. Object of you, no knowledge, and the wisdom, to the mother victorious ones, and the 3 times I prostrate. Ayata, gata gata, para sambati bodhisattva. Ayata, gata gata, para sambati bodhisattva. Ayata, gata gata, para sambati bodhisattva. Sangye chodam sami sonam, janjo badu dani jansi. Dagi Geshe Gibe Sonangi Dola Penshe Sangye Duba Shu Sangye Shudan Sungi Janjo Bado Dani Gyazu Ji Dagi Geshe Gibe Sonangi Dola Penshe Sangye Duba Shu Sangye Shudan Sungi Bado Dani Gyazu Ji Dagi Geshe Gibe Sonangi Dola Penshe Sangye Duba Shu Chutun to Kangi Tuzin is a bit of a tanchi tamashi, Kamashi,
Godam de la Chatse Lo. Yeah, so the mind training, as we went over last week, as a way to taking difficulties into the part. Yeah, so we discussed the various aspects, how to take difficulties into the part by seeing that one aspect, that the difficulties we face is physical or mental suffering or sickness or obstacles in one's kind of projects, then we could think that all those aspects, nothing is beyond law of cause and effect, nothing is random, right? Yeah, when I was young, then also I thought, why are some people suffering more than others, right? There's a question, you know. That's not that things are random and certain people, you know, they have to undergo this, other people do not, or something like that. That's very important to understand, as we went over last week, that things are in the nature of cause and effect relationships, right? So in Buddhism, we talk about, yeah, there's no creator as such externally. We are our own creator for the future, right? So that's quite clear. That in Buddhism, we talk about law of cause and effect externally, with a seed growing to a plant, but also internally in the continuity of consciousness, right? So that conviction in karma is quite essential, because if you don't have that conviction in karma, then this aspect of taking obstacles into the path from the point of view of oh, it's the ripening of negative karma. So when you get sick, you can experience the sickness of, oh, sickness, oh, this, oh, that. Or you can think, okay, that's a sickness, that's a ripening effect of negative karma. And then if you have that insight or that understanding, it's much easier to have the acceptance, right? If there's acceptance, then it's much easier not to have, to have a mental positive attitude towards it, let's put it that way. Yeah, if you don't have a mental positive attitude towards a sickness, then, or other difficulty, then it's just, you create just more mental suffering. That's what it is, right? If you have the situation, as we discussed last week and previous time, if you have a situation and you cannot do anything about its situation, then it depends on your mental attitude, how you deal with it, and if it's either more positive or negative, right? So we saw that one aspect of the mind training is to see, as a result of negative karma coming to ripening, yeah, and then think, oh, great, if we can do it in a sense, is purification, right? So that's kind of, then the mind automatically is much more uplifting and much more capable of dealing with aspects like that, you know, yeah. And the other aspect is the Tonglen practice, yeah, so to take the suffering of others and give away your own happiness. So that's not easy. For that purpose, you have to train again and again in the two methods, as we discussed also in the model on bodhicitta, or the mind of enlightenment. Yeah. So the stronger your compassion is, the stronger your love and kindness is, then the Tonglen practice will really work. If that's not very strong, then it doesn't work. You know, so that's kind of quite clear. And then if you can take that into the part, for those who would like to do that, you don't have to, but those who would like to do that, then it can be of great benefit. Why? Because, as we discussed previously, the negative aspects we experiencing is the ripening of negative karma. Yeah, and the negative karma is always created in relation to, often, to somebody else, right? So now, instead of harming another person, which we have done in the past, now we take the suffering of others, right? So we actually completely, that's why it's actually an incredible antidote to negative karma in the purification process. Yeah. So then if you then take the suffering of others upon yourself, and then we said you could do breathing in, and that dissolves into your sickness or pain in your body, or whatever difficulty you face, or in your self-cherishing attitude, and basically, transforms this self-cherishing attitude, or breaks it down, whatever you like, what you feel comfortable with, you know, that if you take the suffering of others upon yourself, then there's two aspects there, right? We talked about before. One aspect is a purification of negative karma, yeah, that's happening, you know, because of taking the suffering upon others, and the ripening result of negative karma is suffering. So then, because you now, on top of that, you also take the suffering upon others. So actually you create more aspects of purifying negative karma created in the past. There's one aspect. And the other aspect is you counteract the self-cherishing attitude, which is a cause for suffering. Yeah, so that's actually, with the Tonglen practice, you have two kind of tools to improve. Yeah, you purify negative karma, which is a positive thing, and on top of that, you counteract the self-cherishing attitude, as we also saw previously, that the self-cherishing attitude is a cause for problems. The more you have this self-concern, this self-interest, and in particular when it goes to an extent of seeing yourself as more important than others, then it's a cause for suffering, as we talked about a few times before. So yeah, so today I was planning to talk about a combined method, because in order to actually engage in a more structured form of Tonglen, in a more structured form of generating love and kindness and compassion, then the combined method can be very helpful. Yeah, because we went over the 7 instructions of cause and effect, right? So equanimity, seeing all sentient beings as your mother, remember the kindness, repay the kindness, love and kindness, compassion, then the special intention, and then the result of bodhicitta. Yeah, we went over that. So, and to enhance compassion and love and kindness, yeah, we can do Tonglen, for example. Yeah, so in a similar way, when you do the other methods of exchanging self for others, of equanimity, yeah, so here the equanimity was different, as we saw, right? The equanimity in the 7 instructions of cause and effect is kind of the 3 groups you try to equalize of friends, neutral people, and of strangers and our enemies, right? We try to see that they don't exist the way they appear. Yeah, those 3 groups do not exist the way they appear. Yeah, so that we did that with the 7 instructions of cause and effect. The equanimity in the instruction of exchanging self for others is slightly different. Yeah, there it's that others want happiness, don't want suffering, exactly the same as I want happiness and don't want suffering. Yeah, so there's more related directly with ourselves. Yeah, so the equanimity in the kasa, in the exchanging self for others, is more directly related with oneself. Yeah, and in that aspect, there's one aspect of wanting happiness, not wanting suffering. The other aspect we didn't talk about yet, but that will be more clear in the next model when we're exploring emptiness, because there is no, from its own side, existing. Yeah, everything is in nature of dependent origination, right? So it's just one aspect there. We talked about Buddha potential, remember? Yeah, so Buddha potential has 2 aspects. One aspect of Buddha potential is the ultimate nature of our mind, which is the same for all sentient beings. Yeah, being empty of inherent existence, meaning all forms of consciousness are in the nature of dependent origination, and that means all forms of consciousness are empty of existing by themselves only. Yeah, so that's kind of an aspect of reality we take into the mind training of equanimity. There you see that all beings, forms of consciousness, in one way, are very similar to our consciousness, if not equal. We don't say the same, but equal, right? Because the consciousness of somebody else is different than our consciousness, right? We talked about individual streams of consciousness. We talked about subjective experience. Yeah, so consciousness is individual, right? But there are qualities of consciousness that are common between others and ourselves. Yeah, so the qualities of consciousness are common. It doesn't mean that consciousness is the same, right? But there are a lot of similarities. So if you take that into the account of equanimity as well, then it becomes a very profound one. If you're interested in this, then you should read a chapter on meditation by Shantideva, the Bodhisattva Way of Life. It's very clear that there's no distinction between us and them. There's no distinction between us and others. Why? Because we all want happiness, don't want suffering, one thing. But the other thing is that our consciousness is empty of inherent existence. The consciousness of everybody else is empty of inherent existence. Yeah? So that means all beings have a potential to develop. So that's one aspect. And then from a conventional reality, the most subtle form of consciousness is free of stains, as we call it. The most subtle form of consciousness does not have afflictions. Yeah? So that's kind of, all beings have this subtle consciousness, but they never have made it manifest. Yeah? So that's a conventional potential of consciousness, you could say. And that's very inspiring, because like the blue sky remains blue, even now with the overcast in London, or the UK in general, I think. Blue sky is still there, right? The blue sky is still there behind the clouds. So that means our consciousness is very similar. The consciousness of others is exactly the same. In that regard, it's the same, meaning the most subtle form of consciousness is beyond any forms of stains or beyond any forms of afflictions. So that also is present in the continuity of all sentient beings. So that aspect is also the same as our quality of consciousness. So then you see, oh, that's the same for all sentient beings, right? And then there's this temporary cloud of afflictions, yeah? And everybody has these temporary clouds, you know? Certain countries have a bit more than others, but in general, all beings have these clouds of the afflictions, right? So then you see, oh, look, there is no from its own side existing I. There's no from its own side existing them. That's one thing. But also our mind, the most subtle mind we have, and the most subtle mind others have, is exactly the same. It's just temporary. There's these clouds of the afflictions, and sometimes they're a bit darker and sometimes a bit lighter. But, you know, of course, we have different ideas and different kind of feelings and experience, but there's a lot of similarity there, because we have afflictions we don't like, other people have afflictions they don't like. So there also you can see there's a kind of equanimity there, you know, that you know, we want happiness, don't want sufferings. Other want happiness, don't want suffering. And temporarily just obscured by afflictions like anger or desire or jealousy or pride or anxiety or fear or depression whatsoever. It's just a temporary thing. But deep down below, beings are very, very similar. Yeah, so that's kind of a way to contemplate equanimity from the point of view, there is no distinction, you know, between others and yourself. That's kind of a way to also try to equalize self and others with equanimity equanimity of the method, as we discussed before, of the exchange self others. So yeah, maybe before I go into the combined method, maybe we do a meditation on this combined method of equanimity, right? So that means that, similar as we done before, one aspect is to see that the three groups we classify people in friends, those who cherish our ego, they be considered as friend, but we know that our dearest friend can be somebody else's enemy, right? Or somebody else considers our dear friend as a stranger, right? But we say friend. We think that friend exists there from its own side, there with the object, but actually is our projection. It's just in the mind, because other people see our friend completely different. And it's also true for the neutral person or the stranger. We have an indifferent feeling to it too, but other people can see that as a friend, right? So how we look at one person and how somebody else looks at that same person, the person remains the same, but the perception is different of different people, right? And it's also true with the persons we consider as an enemy. Other people consider our enemy as a friend, you see? So it's kind of, what is reality? It's very interesting. You know, as leading up to next model on emptiness, it's kind of, we think what appears to our mind is reality, but that's not always the case. You know? That our mind is very, you know, colored. You know, what we think is reality is just because we believe our own kind of things that appear to our mind, but it doesn't necessarily be the reality, right? Yeah, so then you can see with the three groups already that our worst enemy can be somebody else's dearest friend. But that person at that moment is the same. We're looking at an angle at it, somebody else looks at it. We see we see enemy, somebody else looks friend, but this person is the same, right? It's just our perception that makes a difference. Yeah, so that's one meditation we do, and then after that, see that, you know, all beings, even a person we dislike, you know, even that person has a consciousness that wants happiness, doesn't want suffering, and is just temporarily obscured by the clouds of the afflictions, right? And temporarily they might say something incorrect to you, but that's just because they're not in control over their afflictions. Deep down below, they also don't want disturbance, but it just happens to them, and it's just an emotional hijack. And most people are not even aware of this emotional hijack, and not even aware of afflictions in general, right? So that's kind of important to know and see that there's a mind that wants happiness also there, and there's a mind that has the potential to develop, yeah, even for your worst enemy. And your worst enemy also has a subtle mind that's free of stains, and a mind that is empty of inherent existence, and is just temporarily filled with clouds of afflictions, exactly as our mind. And sometimes the weather is a bit better, and other days the weather is a bit worse, right? Yeah, they're very similar, you know. Yeah, so let's have a short contemplation on that before we go into the combined method of the 7 instruction and the exchange self others. Yeah. So before we do that, same as we previously did, you know, the 9-round breathing to calm down the mind, and then after that, the placement meditation or concentration meditation, as we call it, counting of the breath, right? Make sure you have the 2 mental factors present, meaning alertness as soon as your mind drifts off when you hear something, or you go to the past, to the future, you recognize it with alertness, and with mindfulness, you bring your mind back to what you're supposed to be doing. And then in this case, counting of the breath. Yeah, we do that, and then we do the visualization of Sakyamuni Buddha, and then we do the actual analytical meditation on equanimity. Yeah. And so first, the 9-round breathing exercise, yeah, to calm down the mind. So block left in right, right. Hold a second or two. Block right out left. Second time. Third time. You can change your index finger and block right in left. Hold second or two, block left out right. Second time. And third time. Then both nostrils, right? Breathe in both nostrils. Hold second or two. And then breathe out. Second time. And third time. So then after when you're done, then we do the counting of the breath, right? So count every in-breath as 1, and out breath is 2. In-breath is 3, and then count from 1 to 10, and then start over counting, and make sure the only thing you're supposed to be doing is the counting of the breath, nothing else. Every thought can wait, just don't pay attention. And do the counting of the breath using the 2 mental factors, as we discussed before, alertness and mindfulness. Yeah, so let's do that for about a minute or 2. Then when the mind is, develop a little bit of concentration, then we do the visualization of Sakyamuni Buddha. Yeah, so imagine in front of yourself is a throne supported by snow lions. On top of that, the lotus and sun and moon disk. And on top of that, Sakyamuni Buddha, full lotus position, right hand, right knee, touching the moon disk, left, also begging bowl filled with nectar. Wears the robes of a fully ordained monk, and is made out of golden nectar light, his body, and have a very peaceful and smiling face. And then, so try to imagine the Buddha in front, or at least have the kind of conviction or faith that the Buddha is actually there. And then surrounding yourself, imagine countless beings undergoing different sufferings of body and mind, constantly. Particular, the all pervasive compounding form of suffering, meaning because of their karma and afflictions, there's no escape. So look at that and think how wonderful it would be if we can be of help from them, and for that purpose, first of all, have to generate equanimity. So make a strong, based on this intention, make a strong request to the Buddha in front to bestow blessing and inspirations to generate this equanimity. And then imagine from the heart of the Buddha comes first white light to the crown of yourself and all beings around yourself. And this bestows purification and pacification of obstacles, in particular, the obstacle that prevents you from generating equanimity, So do that visualization of the white light for about, let's say, a minute. Then imagine you're completely filled with this white nectar light, completely purified, and obstacles are pacified. And then again, with the same intention, then make a request to the Buddha in front, and this time the yellow golden nectar light comes from the Buddha's heart to your crown and all beings. And this bestows the potential for the realization to come about, and in particular, the realization of equanimity. So imagine that happening while receiving the golden nectar light, also for about a minute. And then thinking completely filled with this golden nectar light, right? And the mind is completely ready to get the insights, particularly equanimity. So then we do analytical meditation in order to generate equanimity. So imagine in front, there's three groups. Yeah, so you can divide the people in your life in those three groups. Yeah, those you like or your friends, so to say, and those people you met on the street or in public transport, the stranger, yeah, and the people you dislike, the enemy, so to say. Yeah, and then see that over time things change. That you know what is today your friend. If you have an argument, it can turn into a person you dislike, right? Or a person you dislike at a moment because of some misunderstanding, then that can change as well, right? That when you solve the issue, can become your dearest friend. Same with a stranger. Start a conversation and meet up or something, then also that can become a friend. Right? So see that over time things are not fixed as they appear to be. You know, they appear to be very solid person we like or dislike or strangers, but over time they constantly shift. Yeah. So first have a look at that aspect that things change. You know, just our perception at a temporary moment is not there with the object, it's just with our mind. It's not with the person, it's in our mind. And so see that over time our relationship with others has changed. So analyze that for about, let's say, 2 minutes, 2 or 3 minutes. So you see that over time our perception with regard to others people change, but also what we call our dearest friend, somebody else might dislike that same person, right? So where is that friend, or so to say? It's not there with the person, it's in our mind, right? Same with the person we consider as a stranger. Somebody else might consider that person as your friend, you know. So it's not there with that person being a stranger, it's in our mind, right? And same with the person we dislike. It's not there with that person because somebody else might like the person we dislike, you see. So also see that from different angles, people look at people in a different way. So there's no point in thinking that what we perceive is a reality because somebody else perceives something completely different, right? So also look at that aspect of the three individual groups, also for about, yeah, let's say 2 or 3 minutes. Then have a short conclusion. Conclusion here, let's see, is that over time, our perception with regard to those three individual changes, but also at the present moment, what we consider as a particular friend, somebody else consider as enemy, and the other way around. So actually, those people, those three groups are actually exactly the same, right? It's just our perception that makes a distinction. It's just human beings wanting happiness, not wanting suffering. So come to this conclusion first and focus on that for about half a minute. And then the next part, try to see that, you know, the persons other than us, so to say, they want happiness in the exactly same way as we want happiness. You know, this innate kind of spontaneous wish of holding happiness when you have happiness and not wanting suffering when you're experiencing suffering. Yeah, that's, if you have a little bit of a sickness, you want to get cured, right? It's spontaneous. You don't have to think about it. So that wish is true for each and every individual wanting happiness and not wanting suffering, you know, so it's exactly the same for all beings, equal in number, you know, exactly the same. Yeah, so first analyze that aspect for about, let's say, a minute or two. Yeah. And then also try to see that they are temporary others, so to say, if they're nice to you or not nice to you. They have a mind wanting happiness, not wanting suffering, but also they have a very pure mind deep down below, you know, like a blue sky, so to say. They just have temporary afflictions, and that's why they say things to you, right? But deep down below, the purity of their mind is exactly the same as your purity of your mind. You know? It's just temporary clouds or temporary afflictions that makes a difference. Other than that, they want happiness, don't want suffering, and the purity of the mind is exactly the same. Yeah, so also analyze this aspect for about a minute or two. And then come to the final conclusion that sees all those beings, they want happiness, don't want suffering. The purity of their mind is the same as my purity of my mind. And it's just only the difference is just temporary thoughts or temporary afflictions that makes a difference, nothing else. There is nothing solid different or independent different or something like that. Yeah, so come to that kind of conclusion and focus on that for about half a minute. Yeah, to conclude, we can request the Buddha in front for blessing inspirations to actually get these realizations of equanimity, you know. So we can make the request if you like. And then the Buddha comes to the crown of your head. And imagine he faces the same direction as you're facing. And then the throne dissolves into the lotus. And then the Buddha becomes smaller and smaller, like the size of your thumb or something like that, you know. And then descends to your crown, throat, and then at the level of your heart, imagine the Buddha dissolves into light and becomes one, or the Buddha's qualities, you can think, become one with your own mind, and you can feel a little bit of, happiness or bliss at the level of your heart, so to say, you know. So think you get the qualities or the blessings of the Buddha's qualities, you know. All right, so we'll stop. So that's the combined methods of equanimity, you know, of the two. Yeah. So let's have a look at the combined method of the 7 instructions, of course, in effect, and exchanging self others. Yeah. So that's kind of a very profound method. Why is it a profound method? Because exchanging the exchanging self for others is focused upon enhancing, if you do it with Tonglen, enhancing compassion and enhancing love and kindness, right? But eventually you have to generate this kind of, I want to become a Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings, you know? So that's kind of why the combined method can sometimes be very helpful. I think we talked about the 3 types of bodhicitta, did we? Of the shepherd-like or the shepherdess-like. Did we talk about that? Yeah? No? Okay. Not going. Okay, that's important. So there's 3 types of mind training of bodhicitta, so to say, you know. One is the shepherd-like or the shepherdess-like, meaning first the sheep in the pen and then you go home yourself, right? So that's kind of first others, then yourself. Yeah, that's from the point of view of mind training, very strong. Yeah, because it counteracts the self-cherishing attitude. Yeah. First others, then yourself. And you see that sometimes in the bodhisattva ideal, I don't want to become a Buddha, first others, then I go, you know, that's kind of, from the point of view of mind training, it's very sophisticated, you know, because it gets rid of the self-cherishing attitude and you think more about others than yourself, right? So that's the first point, the shepherdess like. Yeah. The second is boatsman or boatswoman, you say that? Okay. Huh?
Sometimes it's translated
mariner. This one who on the sea on the boat. Yeah. So then the boatsman or boatswoman is kind of all together. Yeah, you arrive on the shore all together. Yeah, so you go together to enlightenment. Yeah, that's another form of mind training for bodhicitta. Yeah. The third one is the king or queen's like approach, meaning if you are a king or a queen, or if you are a prime minister, so to say, you can do a lot for society. Unfortunately, most of the kings and queens and prime ministers we have on this planet, they're not that well motivated as the bodhicitta motivation. Yeah. Yeah. So, but you can imagine if you are in a position like that and you are a bodhisattva, then you can do so much good for society because you have control and you can make decisions, you know? Yeah. So that's the king-like or the queen-like approach. So then the 7th instruction, of course, in effect, is actually this king or queen-like approach, right? Until I can become a Buddha, I cannot really benefit others to the fastest extent. right? You can benefit others, but if you become a Buddha, you can do so much more. So that's, you can see in the 7 instructions of cause and effect, you go into this training, getting close to sentient beings by remembering the kindness, repaying the kindness, loving kindness, compassion, then special intention. I'm going to liberate sentient beings. And then you move to the next step of, I need to become a Buddha to do that, right? Yeah, so we talked about bodhicitta has, before we talked about bodhicitta has 2 aspirations, right? One causal aspiration of great compassion, wanting to liberate beings, and one resultant aspiration of, I want to become a Buddha to do that. Yeah, so that means that you need a particular capacity to be a real benefit, you know, so that you can see that the 2 aspirations are needed to generate bodhicitta, right? The causal one of great compassion, and the resultant one of want to become a Buddha to accomplish that. Yeah? So based on that kind of reasoning, we see that a king-like approach eventually is the one to be established, right? Eventually you have to get the qualifications to do something for the benefit of beings, right? So that's kind of why we strive eventually for the king-like or queen-like approach, but in order to enhance love and kindness and compassion, then the shepherd or shepherdess approach is very powerful, because first others, then yourself, right? You see that? So that's what we see. Same with the exchanging self for other methods. This exchanging self for other method is enhancing this love and kindness and compassion, especially when it's combined with Tonglen, right? Yeah. So then you can see that there's different techniques which have different kind of features. Yeah. So if you combine those techniques, that can be very powerful. Or sometimes you can then meditation equanimity. The other time you do meditation on in a structured way, right? The next day you do meditation on the 7th instruction, of course, and effect. Then the day after, or the week after, you do week by week. You can also do that, you know. Then you do a kind of contemplation on exchanging self for others. And then you can do 1 week the combined method. Yeah, so that's just, our mind needs so many tools and methods to move in a particular direction, right? So that's kind of why we have those methods available. And then, yeah, now I was thinking maybe explain the combined methods. Yeah, yeah, for the 2 traditions. Yeah. So there's different scriptures you can find back in the Liberation of Palm Your Hand, or Lama Tsongkhapa's great exposition of state of path to enlightenment, or in other Lamrims or mind trainings. Yeah. So there's different numbers, but yeah, I just give you one of those aspects. So first of all, equanimity. Yeah, that's true. And we just went over the equanimity of the combined method, right? Not just the 3 individuals you like to equalize, but also seeing that there's no difference between you and others. Yeah, from the point of view of wanting happiness, not wanting suffering, from the point of view of the nature of the mind, so to say, from the point of view, there's no from its own side existing I, and from its own side existing them. It's very interesting that that David Bohm, you know, this physicist I mentioned a few times, he said that the problems in society are because of seeing an independent us and independent them, right? So that's not a reality. So it's very interesting that he actually sees that as a problem in society. Even that's why there's discrimination. That's why we want security, we want power, and it's because we see this I, you know, as very concrete, right? And them was very concrete. That's why so that's kind of another aspect of equanimity, to see that's not a reality. And we will go over that more in the next model on emptiness. Yeah, that this become more clear. So the more you understand emptiness, the more stronger your equanimity will become. The more you understand emptiness, the stronger your wish for liberation become, because you see why you are suffering because of ignorance, and you see how to get out of it. Yeah? And also the more you understand emptiness, the stronger your compassion will become. Because if you really have a good understanding of emptiness, the compassion almost automatically increases, as we say, you know. Yeah, so that's kind of, because you see beings don't exist from their own side, and they have their ignorance, and you see the possibility to liberate them, right? So it's kind of a very profound aspect of that. Yeah. So first, in the combined method, first step, same thing. In all of two methods, we have first equanimity, right? So that's the basis. Without equanimity, then we don't move forward. We still make distinctions between individuals, and then we should not have that. Yeah? So equanimity is the basis. Yeah. Then you do a few aspects of the 7 instruction. Yeah. First, you see all sentient beings as your mother or your father, or as a person who took care. Yeah. So then you take reincarnation into account, right? Of since beginner's lifetime. Then we have got countless fathers and mothers of people who took care, especially in the time when we were born from a womb, right? Yeah. So yeah. So that's that step of seeing all sentient beings. There's no reason why not. They at least once have been your father or your mother or a person who took care. And then sometimes in this life we have a problem with our parents or something like that. That can happen, but that was not always the case, right? And it's kind of countless lifetimes we had amazing parents, you know. So that we try to focus upon, because the majority is important to focus upon, you know. Yeah. So if that's the case, then that's the first step. Yeah. After equanimity, then seeing all sentient beings as your mother. Yeah. So that needs a lot of time. In the Lamrim, traditional Lamrim teachings, they say this is one of the most difficult points to develop, because it takes a lot of reasoning, it takes reincarnation into account, it takes a lot of habituation into account. It doesn't come easily, you know. Yeah. Yeah. So seeing all sentient beings as your mother, or father, or person who took care. First point. Yeah. Second one is to remember their kindness. Yeah, because we want to get close to beings, so we will remember their kindness. Yeah, when they took care of us, and you can even see in the animal realm, as we discussed previously, how cats take care of kittens, or you know, dogs about the puppies and things like that. Yeah, in the West we don't see that much, because they got because with pets, you know, they go to the doctor. Yeah. So we don't see that, but in India we have a lot of wild cats and wild dogs, so you see that a lot. Yeah, so it's very easy. But yeah, you can just look in the wild in general, right? How beings or birds take care of the little ones is quite. In London, it's a bit difficult to, because you don't see that many birds and nests and things like that. But if you live more in the countryside, like in the monastery we live in South India, about 15-20 minutes from the forests with elephants and tigers and huge. The forest all the way, the Ghats go all the way to basically Mumbai. It's kind of Mumbai is kind of huge. You know, it's very big. So then also the area we live has a lot of, you know, animals, and also wild. I mean, not wild dogs, but stray dogs and stray cats. So yeah, we're surrounded always with this kind of beings, and then you can see how they take care. Unbelievable, you know, licking them clean, and the birds are flying like crazy to get food for the little ones constantly, right? And then when there's danger of a snake or another cat, a cat comes or a dog comes, and the birds, they just attack, you know, to protect the children or the newborn or the eggs, you know. And then they give so much and food here, and then give like to them, you know. And then yeah, it's a lot of hardship involved if you really think about it, you know. So yeah, we try to remember the kindness of others, in the particular those who took care of us, right? Yeah, when you're baby born, there, you know, it's kind of, without others you don't survive. It's quite clear. Food and shelter and protection. Yeah, without the father or mother, person who takes care, it doesn't know. Sometimes little children don't know how to eat, you know. They make everything like completely dirty. Yeah. So, you know, they need to depend on people who take care, right? It's very clear, you know. Or they don't know how to make toilets or brush their teeth or things like that. You know, they all have to learn, you know. So that's kind of thanks to the kindness of the father, mother, or person who took care, you know, constantly education. This no good, that's no good. Yeah. So yeah, that's to remember the kindness of others. Then the point after that, as we already discussed before, is then remembering the kindness, and then try to have a wish to repay the kindness, right? So the wish to repay their kindness is a kind of mental attitude. Yeah. And then not just think about, oh, I'm gonna give them a nice chocolate cake or something like that. That's nice, but to do a little bit more than that. Yeah. To actually have a wish to repay their kindness in a more constructive way. Yeah. To generate a mind. Yeah. We talk about often there's very important to have temporary benefit for others, but also ultimate benefit is very important, right? Yeah. So temporarily, if a person is in need for food or shelter or whatsoever, you try to do your best to help. But on an ultimate perspective, then to train their minds to create less causes for suffering, that's much more constructive on the long term, right? Yeah, yeah. So that's very important to make, to make that clear, that there's need for temporary happiness, but also ultimate happiness is needed. Yeah, so that's kind of from the point of view repaying the kindness. Yeah. So then when you have the aspect of repaying the kindness, then you come closer to others, right? That's why we do this technique. And you become closer to others. So then in the 7 instructions, of course, in effect, then you go to love and kindness and compassion, right? But here, before you go there, you first do the aspect of exchanging self for others. Yeah. So equanimity we already did, and then you do, at this point, you contemplate the faults of the self-cherishing attitude, right? So then seeing, as we talked before, that the more you think, more self-concern you have, or the more self-cherishing you have, or the more self-importance you have, and you do not think about others, that creates a cause of loneliness, that creates a cause of short-sighted aspect, it creates a cause for disturbed mind, you know, no clarity, you know, and then all other afflictions will increase. The stronger your ego is, so to say, the stronger the afflictions become, you know, the stronger the anger will come. No, not I, this, I, that. Yeah, we see that in politics also. The stronger the I is, because of the self-cherishing attitude, is one aspect is the stronger you think there is an I, the stronger the self-cherishing attitude becomes, right? But also the stronger the self-cherishing attitude is, the stronger the ego becomes, right? So there's there's 2 things, right? There's one aspect is what we're going to talk about in the next model a lot, is this apprehension of a self. You think there's an independent entity, an I there, right? That's in charge of everything and that you want to protect. Or when somebody criticizes you, you say, no, that's not true. That's not how I am. I am not like this, or I did not do this. Yeah, so this I, the stronger that I is, the stronger you see that I as from its own side existing entity, the stronger all the afflictions will become. That's quite clear. The stronger the self-cherishing attitude becomes, the stronger the ego becomes, the stronger self-interest becomes, you know. So that's kind of very clear, you know. Yeah. So then you contemplate the faults of the self-cherishing attitude, right? That's seeing, if you only think about yourself or cherish yourself and do not think about others, yeah, then it's a cause for suffering. Yeah, so that's very important to contemplate from the various angles, as we already discussed previously. But you can see from your own mind, as I said before, if you just somebody, you know, wants your help or something like that, or whatever way, material way, or give your time to talk or whatsoever, and you or social event or whatsoever, and say, no, I don't have time, or no, I can't give you money, oh no, this. Then you go away from that situation and you feel something is not right, or you feel a bit kind of unhappy, basically. But in the other way, if you then give something the best way you can with a good motivation, or you give your time and you talk with the person, then you go away and you feel more satisfied. You know, so that's, you can see a believer or non-believer, a religious person or not a religious person, this is uniform, right? That's kind of universal, that people who act or engaging acts of kindness, they feel much more satisfied in life. It's very clear, you know. So that's kind of, it's not a Buddhist principle, it's just what we call cause and effect relationships, right? If your mind thinks about only yourself, then the result is that you become unhappy. If the mind thinks about others, then the result is that you become happier. That's nothing to do with Buddhism. That's just cause and effect relationships in the continuity of consciousness, right? Yeah. So yeah, you contemplate the faults of the self-cherishing attitude, right? So from different angles, personally, and look at others, you know, it's quite clear. If you meet other people and you look at how, you know, we're not clairvoyant, but we can see it, you know, when you talk with people, you can a little bit get a little bit idea, and with facial expressions and things like that. People with a strong ego, then you can see there's suffering there. You know? Or when you're very young, as a little child, I need this, I need it, I need that, you know, then you can see in those days, you know, that's the stronger the ego is, the stronger the self-cherishing attitude is, the stronger the suffering actually appears, you know, that's quite clear. Yeah. So that's, yeah, contemplating the faults of the self-cherishing attitude. And then you contemplate the benefits of cherishing others. Yeah, so first the faults of self-cherishing, and then the benefit of cherishing others, right? Because if you, as we just discussed, if you give some time to others, or you give something material or food to another person, or you do an act of kindness, as I just said, then it gives satisfaction in life. You know, that's why people, you know, they when they do something for others, they feel much more content, you know, in life. That's quite clear. Yeah. So then you contemplate the, you know, the benefits of cherishing others, and yeah, about those two, I said before, Shantideva, so clear. He says we don't have to say much. Just look at the Buddha. Look at us. The Buddha always cherished others. We always cherish ourselves. And what is the difference between the Buddha and us? We don't have to say much more, right? Yeah. So it's quite clear, you know, that the Buddha is very interesting. If you have time, then you read the Jataka tales, for example, you know, or there's a Sutra of the Wise and the Foolish, or all these kind of historical stories about the Buddha's lives of his previous lives. Very interesting. Yeah, some stories are a little bit kind of, ooh, you know, giving away parts of the body and things like that. Is kind of, for us, it's not really, we're not that far yet. We're not that developed yet, right? But it's very inspiring if you see what the Buddha did in previous life. Or you can just read sutras like the Golden Light Sutra, for example. It's a very good sutra. We also have here English translations of the Golden Light Sutra. There's very interesting stories in there, you know, that the Buddha, you know, once he was, there was a pond, and there was, yeah, it was kind of, the water flow to the pond stopped, and then, you know, then the fish were almost dying, you know. So then Buddha, as a bodhisattva, thought, what I have to do, I help the fish, you know. And then he went to the king to get elephants to carry water into the pond. So much hardship in organizing things like that, you know. So then he got all the water into the pond, and then the fish were there, and then he thought the fish are hungry. So he have to get, you know, food. So he got, again, he had a good relation with the king, and the king was probably very supportive. So then he give food, and then give food to the fish, you know. And then he said, oh, maybe I have to teach them the Dharma. And then you can see, even there was first was kind of a temporary benefit, yeah, of giving water to the fish and food to the fish. But then the Buddha also thought, as a bodhisattva at that time, I have to give them the Dharma as well, you know. So then he was standing in the middle of the pond and recited a name of a particular Arat, a very long name, yeah. And then because of that, the hearing, you know, that's the benefit, as we say often, by just listening to the Dharma. It creates incredible imprints in the mind, or potentials in the mind. Yeah, we very short-sighted. We think about this life, or today, or this month, right? But if you read the sutras, then the mind goes a little bit more wider, you know, because then the Buddha read this, you know, give them the Dharma, or taught them the Dharma. Fish, they don't understand, right? Fish or birds or animals, they don't understand if you say "Om Mani Padme Hum" to them. They don't understand what you're doing, you know, but at least they get an imprint of having heard the Dharma, right? Yeah, or making connection by being there in the water and proclaiming the Dharma like the Buddha did, you know. So yeah, so then he did that, and then he went back to the palace, and you can see, talk about not 100% perfect. I think he went to a party, and then he got a bit drunk, and then as a bodhisattva, right? And then he was laying on his bed, and then woke up, and then there were flowers everywhere, beautiful flowers everywhere. And then he checked, and the else checked in the lake, and all the fish died. They said, "Oh no!" We would think like that, right? Oh no! And then actually, what happened? All the fish went to one of the God realms. You know, the consciousness of all the fish went to the God realm. So this kind of thing is for us one. Ooh, you know, is kind of difficult for us to comprehend. But if you see, they think about lifetimes. You know, that's for us very important. The more you think about the vast vision, the much easier it is to deal with problems. You know, it's very true. They think about lifetimes. Okay, you try to benefit a person, but it doesn't go. But you think, oh, wow, I made a connection. Next lifetime, next step. Or a few lifetimes down the line, next step. That's kind of a very interesting vision, because sometimes we have a good motivation with things and we try, but the outcome is not according to our expectation, right? And then we give up. But instead of giving up, you think, okay, I tried my best and I had good motivation, but now having the obstacle of not being able to accomplish it, may in future lifetimes, may I always accomplish things by purifying the obstacle now, by purifying negative karma now. And then you move forward. That's a very constructive way forward, rather than saying, yeah, I tried, didn't work, forget it. Then you don't move forward, right? Yeah, so that's very important. Yeah. So what did we say? Think about the faults of self-cherishing and the benefits of cherishing others. You know, that's kind of, yeah, there's more stories. One story is very, very inspiring. Talk about, you know, the Buddha think about long-term benefit, you know. Then once it was, the Buddha was, there was a cannibal, you say, who eats human beings in the early days. And then he killed already quite a few people from the royal family, you know, because eat their flesh or something like that. And then the Buddha was king. And then he captured the Buddha at the time as a bodhisattva. And then he was, yeah, planning to capture him and prepare him and everything. And the Buddha said, oh, please, he said, I received one verse of teaching from this Brahma today, and I have to go back to make an offering. And I promise you, I will come back, you know. So this cannibal thought, no way he's coming back. But okay, I just test him, you know. If he doesn't come back, I catch him again, right? So then Buddha went and made offering to his teacher, you know, and then came back. And this cannibal was so surprised. He said, why are you coming back? You know, are you not afraid of me? He said, I never lied in my whole life. And I keep my promise. So then he came back. Here I am. You know? And then this cannibal got completely confused, you know, why would you do something like that? And then he started explaining about the mind. He started explaining about karma. And then he taught him the doctrine. And then this cannibal get so much regret, all the negativities these he had done, and then did a lot of purification practice, right? So very interesting, very skillful aspects. Yeah, anyway, sometimes it's inspiring stories of the Buddha himself, you know. Yeah, anyway. So yeah, and then you see, always cherishing others and never really cherishing himself, right? And that brought him to enlightenment, you see. So that's kind of what Shantideva said, is we don't have to say much, just look at the difference between the two and what we have done and what the Buddha has done. So that's quite clear. Okay, so contemplate the faults of self-cherishing, the benefits of cherishing oneself. Yeah. So then the next point is then to exchange, in the sense to see be exactly the same. Yeah, oneself and others. So then, if you have that aspect, then it's much easier, you know, to generate compassion and love and kindness. Yeah, so then in this technique, then first it is compassion and then love and kindness. And why is that so? Because first you want to take suffering of others and then you want to give them happiness, right? But that's kind of the sequence in this kind of combined method is reversed. Remember, when you do the 7 instructions of cause and effect, is first love and kindness to bring people closer to you, and then compassion, right? So here we already, with exchange self for others, we already have this close feeling in the sense of not seeing a difference anymore, right? So then the next step is this compassion, right? So So if you do it in this combination, if you do that, if you like at that time, you can do the Tonglen practice, right? You take the suffering of others upon yourself by inhaling their suffering, and it dissolves into your sickness or your headache or pain or your depression or your self-cherishing attitude, right? Yeah, so you do that. And then you give away your own happiness to others. Yeah, and then you can do with breathing if you want to. Yeah? Inhale if you want to make it a little bit more real in the form of black smoke or something like that, to take away the suffering of others, right? And exhale white light or brightness to give away your own happiness to others. Yeah, so that's kind of how you do that. Yeah. Yeah, so you do the Tonglen practice at that time. Yeah. And then if you do this Tonglen practice, what you do then, you imagine in your visualization, you take away the suffering of others, you know, and then you give away your happiness to others. And then you imagine that all the beings you're doing this for, they all basically get rid of suffering and they achieve every happiness they need. You know? And then achieve every happiness they need, then you think they develop, you know, in the Lamrim, they get the realizations of the stages of the path to enlightenment. Yeah, that's kind of what you imagine when you do this inhaling and exhaling, if you like to do that, right? So if you don't like to do Tonglen, you don't have to do that, I said many times before. If you don't like to meditate, there's also okay. Yeah, we said before. I just explained because there's a kind of traditional explanation, and some people benefit from that, right? So, but yeah, you don't have to do it, right? Yeah. Okay, so what did I say? Yeah, you visualize that you take away the suffering of others and you give away your own happiness to others. Yeah, and then you think that all beings actually are completely freed of suffering and achieve every temporary happiness, but also they develop, as you do this visualization, if you exhale, then you also imagine they get all the right conditions. By the light you're exhaling, you get all the right conditions of developing, of receiving teachings, of meditating, and then you imagine they all become Buddhas, basically. So that's kind of what you can do in the visualization. Yeah, you take away all the suffering, and they get all their happiness, but also they develop in the ultimate form of happiness to liberation and enlightenment. Yeah, so that's kind of what you do in that visualization. So yeah, you can do that visualization of Tonglen for a few minutes or so, and then at the end of the visualization, you think they all achieved liberation and enlightenment. Yeah, all their suffering is gone, all their afflictions are gone. They now completely liberated or completely enlightened. You know? Yeah, so you can think like that. Yeah. So then, when you close to stopping that meditation, then you think, this is just a visualization. I really have to do something. I really have to make this a reality. Yeah, to really liberate beings from their suffering and give them all the happiness and lead them to enlightenment. So I need to take the responsibility, to do this. Yeah, so that's the next step. Yeah, we call it what did we call it before? Special intention, right? We said, yeah. So now is a special intention of taking the responsibility. This is just a visualization. I really have to do it in reality. Yeah. So you get what we call the special intention of the responsibility. I'm going to do this. Yeah. So that's kind of the special intention. Feeling like that. Yeah. That point, special intention. I'm going to make it happen. From now on, this is a visualization, but I really have to. Because if your compassion is stronger, and then you do this visualization, and then the visualization gets enhanced of the Tonglen, and then you see, it's just a visualization. I really have to make it happen. Then your responsibility feeling becomes stronger, right? Yeah, so that's kind of what happens there. And then after this responsibility feeling, then the next point is then, so that responsibility feeling of the special intention can be this compassion, of great compassion, right? I am going to liberate sentient beings from the suffering. I'm going to do this. I'm going to take responsibility. Yeah, that's what we call this special intention. And of great compassion. Yeah, we said there's a distinction last time between compassion in general and great compassion, right? Compassion in general is how wonderful it be if sentient beings be free from suffering. May they be free from suffering. Yeah, that's a general compassion, right? But the great compassion is, you know, I'm going to take responsibility. You know, I'm going to do it. Yeah, so Lama Zopa Rinpoche, the founder of one of the founders, Lama Yeshe, of our organization FPMT, spiritual director for many decades. Lama Zopa Rinpoche used to say, I'm going to liberate sentient beings by myself alone. It's very, very courageous. You know? It's a very courageous mindset. You know, I'm going to make it happen by myself alone. I'm going to do it. And that's kind of this courageous bodhisattva ideal that we see throughout the tradition. Like His Holiness Dalai Lama said, I'm going to do it, you know, for this courageous kind of heroic approach. Yeah, then that's very important. Yeah, yeah. If I can't do it this life, I'm going to work hard towards it. But if not all possible, then I could just continue next life. You know, that kind of vast vision. You know, if that special intention of this courageous compassion is there, it's an incredible, powerful mind. Then little things in life is like peanuts, you know. Then we think, oh, this difficulty, oh, that difficulty is very temporary, because you think my continued consciousness goes on anyway, you know, and I'm going to do it. So this temporary thing is no big deal, and you just move on, right? That's a very powerful mind to keep going. And then also when projects don't go well, when you did it, good motivation, you try your best, then you think, okay, another obstacle gone. This obstacle prevented me from accomplishing something. Gone, great, carry on, right? So that's a very positive attitude, a very powerful one. You know, then you get never discouraged. You know, that's kind of very important. Yeah. So that's this great compassion, right? Taking responsibility. Yeah. Of the special intention. And then you analyze, do I have the capacity to do this? Yeah. So you can see, then you go into this king or queen-like approach. I have to become a Buddha to do this all, right? So then you generate this incredible kind of kind of conclusion. I have to become a Buddha to accomplish this, right? Yeah. So that's kind of the result of bodhicitta, right? The king-like, queen-like approach. So you see, when you do the Tonglen practice, the Tonglen practice is mainly focused upon, you know, the shepherd or shepherdess-like approach, right? Yeah, you want to liberate others from that suffering before yourself, or you want to give them your happiness before yourself, right? So that's kind of the shepherd or shepherdess approach that enhances compassion and love and kindness. That's quite clear. Yeah. So then, but once that is enhanced, then you have to be realistic and say, I don't have the capacity right now. I have to become a Buddha in order to do it, right? So then the king or queen-like approach comes, right? Yeah. So that's, then you can relate the different methods of mind training together. Yeah, so that's the different instructions we talked about today is kind of the combined method of the two, right? Of the 7 instructions, cause and effect, and the exchanging self for others. This is a traditional explanation. And I said last time also, if this is all too much for you, then you just pick the things out that in a secular or universal way, what benefits, right? Think about the kindness of others in general and try to repay their kindness, right? Or equanimity, and then move how wonderful be of all sentient beings, abide in happiness, and may they abide in happiness, or wonderful sentient beings may be free of suffering, may they be free of suffering, and then contemplate in that way also benefits the mind, right? Yeah. But yeah, from a Buddhist perspective, then that's how we train. Just been explained. Yeah, so that's kind of you can take out what you think is benefit, and if you want to do more the traditional way, then there's great benefit because it's very structured, and there's a reason for that structure. You know, that's kind of why it's important also to hear the traditional explanation, because then you see what can be produced, and you can produce this incredible mind, as we talked about previously. People, you know, in occupied Tibet, in prison, being tortured and things like that, but they can completely transform this incredible difficulty in life, you know, being tortured for years at a time, and always on the edge of dying with starvation is a very difficult situation, right? So most people will struggle with a lot of trauma, yeah, but the majority of Tibetans didn't have this kind of post-traumatic stress disorder. And then the question was asked to His Holiness, and then His Holiness says, okay, probably two reasons. One reason is acceptance of the suffering because of karmic relationships, and the other one is this powerful bodhicitta, right? It's this incredible constructive form of compassion. Yeah? So that's very clear in the tradition. If it's done in a very structured way, the mind becomes incredibly powerful. Yeah, little things in life, yeah, powerful, like a rocket, not a rocket, but I say firework, blue. Yeah, it's true, because when the mind becomes very trained in that way, then it's much easier to deal with difficulties in life, because you see the bigger picture, you see lifetimes, right? And then you focus on that more than just yeah, temporary things. Yeah, so that's not the main purpose why we meditate on this, but there's a great benefit, right? Yeah, because the main purpose why we meditate on this is, of course, eventually to great causes for enlightenment. Yeah. Okay, so that concludes the mind training model, right? And then the next week we go into emptiness. Yeah, so the review discussion question session we do after, because I'm going to hibernate in November. So I have to do some other business in India and Nepal. So I leave the country somewhere in November. And so then we do the few models together, and then the reviews we do after, right? So next week we just come together again, and then we go into emptiness. So emptiness, as I said many times before, it looks difficult, but it's not too difficult. Yeah, and it's very important. It's one of the most important teachings of the Buddha, right? Yeah, if not the. I mean, basically, I have to be honest. It's the most important teaching of the Buddha, because Shantideva says very clearly in his Bodhisattva Way of Life, chapter 9, the first verse, he says, all the teachings of the Buddha, yeah, all the different branches of the doctrine, so to say, were there for the purpose of preparing the disciples for the teachings on emptiness. Yeah, so that means that emptiness is the most important topic in the Buddhist doctrine. Not an easy one, but you take it step by step, right? So emptiness is challenging, but very interesting. And if you look at the philosophy of 2,500 years ago about reality, and now you engage in dialogues with physicists in particular in the field of quantum mechanics, but even neuroscientists, same thing. We talk about very similar things. That's very interesting. That this philosophy, which is more than 2,500 years old, is completely in accordance with findings in modern science. Yeah, I said many times before, we have this course online on quantum mechanics and Buddhist philosophy with Carlo Rovelli, one of the I think one of the very well respected scientists in the field of quantum mechanics, and a very popular one. And yeah, he's wrote many books translated in 30, 40 different languages. So it's not just a man of the street, so to say. And when you engage with a dialogue with Carlo Rovelli, and we talked about it with different views of reality, he just told me, he said, there was not during the dialogue, it was just when we just met separately, he said, I can completely agree with this all. And to really understand emptiness, do I have to become a Buddhist? He asked me. Yeah, so I said, no need. You can study emptiness without becoming a Buddhist. But that's a very interesting statement, right? And even in his book Helgoland, he states that in chapter 5, it's a very inspiring book. It's very short. It's a very inspiring book about physics and quantum mechanics. And then in one chapter 5, he says, and he read many forms of philosophy, as well. He said, after reading Nagarjuna's philosophy, right, philosophy of emptiness, we also follow in our tradition. He said, it made a very profound impression on me. He said, I didn't find any other form of philosophy so profound as this one. So that's quite a statement in a book by such a kind of, well-renowned physicist, right? So that's kind of quite clear that the teaching on emptiness seems to be quite accurate. I shouldn't say quite, seems to be accurate with regards to the findings in physics, right? Quite clear. But there's more things we can talk about later. Yeah, but the Buddha, all the teachings are meant to teach emptiness. Why? Because emptiness is the key to eliminate suffering, because it eliminates ignorance. We know ignorance is the root of all our afflictions, right? So you have to understand that reality, and then once you understand it, then you can eliminate it. And it's not easy. I have to prepare a little bit, but not too difficult either. Yeah. So, and emptiness is also something to be understood, that some people, when they start with emptiness, they think, ooh, then the mind gets distracted, or they look somewhere else, or they fall asleep, or they walk away, or the mind gets unhappy. You know, also happens. When your mind gets unhappy, when you study emptiness, you should think, great. Because it's just, since beginner's lifetime, we're holding on to from its own side existing self. And we think that's a reality. But now we start to see that reality is not really real. It's just a mental fabrication, right? So that is caused quite of a stir inside the mind, you can imagine, you know, but a healthy one, you know. So that's kind of a few challenging aspects of emptiness. But yeah, once you get the idea, then afflictions will become less, you know. That's very clear, you know, that the more you think about emptiness, afflictions will become less, much easier to deal with issues in life. And then more than that, if you get it one day, you realize it, and then you get a direct perception after some time, then you eliminate ignorance step by step, and you on your way out of samsara, right? That's Aryadeva, one of the great masters, also a disciple of Nagarjuna, so to say, I just mentioned. Aryadeva, he wrote in his 400 verses, he said, if you just question emptiness, or you doubt about emptiness, that's a very good sign. That's a sign, because some people just walk away when you talk about emptiness, or you know, no interest, you know. But so when you even doubt it, Aryadeva said, that's a sign of merit, you know. And then even if you doubt it, it shakes samsara, because it's kind of questioning the reality, the way it appears, and what actually is the reality. Yeah, so we're going to talk about it. Yeah, next week. Yeah. Okay, so if there's any questions, not about emptiness yet, we do that next week maybe, and then about the mind trainings, and then, oh yeah, emptiness we talk about a little bit, it's fine. Yeah, whatever question there is. Yeah. Carlo Rovelli? Yeah, the Carlo Rovelli. He's original from Italy. He has wrote many books, very interesting books. So his newest book is, I mean, published kind of, what is it, 2 years ago? Helgoland? Helgoland. Yeah, so it's a very good book. And we also have an online course with him together about quantum mechanics and Buddhist philosophy in the Science and Wisdom Life project. Yeah, he's a very interesting personality also as a person. Yeah? He's very kind of, how to say, very easygoing, but also very interested in different fields. You know? And that makes him probably such a good scientist, you know? Yeah.
Okay, we've got a few questions online, so we'll start there. Abelardo, you had your hand up first. Would you like to go ahead?
Thank you, Geshe. Thank you so much. I say to you the same as last week.
Yeah, you can record it and just replay.
Yeah, what I said last week is this is the best lecture you've given so far for me.
Okay.
But that's an impermanent statement. That today is the best lecture.
Yeah. Today.
Yeah, today.
The previous one were not good, right?
Well, no, it's all good, but it's a greater synthesis.
Okay.
Yeah, it's really touches me deeply. But my question is this: I'm a professional psychologist, a Western trained, so I'm coming from there. Okay. There's an article I read by a man called Philip Cushman called "The Empty Self."
Okay.
Yeah, it's social psychology, and he analyzed. Well, he has the opinion that the sense of self, the cultural sense of self, is shifting, is evolving throughout human cultures. It's very culture dependent, and that after the Second World War, mainly it started in the United States. A new type of personality configuration, which he called the empty self, is to describe a type of narcissistic personality structure. In other words, a self-cherishing attitude-based psyche, and it has to do with the breaking up of the primal relationships in the families as women start going into the workforce, and who take care of the children who have to grow up to compete and survive in a very, very harsh, competitive, individualistic society where you have to have a strong ego to survive. And so I have been trying for about 30 years to integrate my very limited knowledge of Buddhist Dharma with Western trained psychologists in London, by the way, and in the 1970s.
Yeah.
And the way this is narcissistic personality disorder is manifesting worse and worse is through fragmentation of the self, and which leads to borderline personality disorder. So like if you're dialoguing with someone, that person might dissociate, it might shift, and you think you're talking to the same person, but you're talking to a different one. It's a different personality, multiple personality syndrome. So I think this might be very related to why people in the West reject mind training in this way, because they're not ready to, how can you counteract the fear of emptiness, of not being? So this is a different kind of emptiness.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of one way, the stronger the habituation pattern is of a particular aspect, the less interested you are in the opposite of that, right? That's not only with the apprehension of the self, but anything. If you're, a strong habituation pattern of being a smoker, then you don't really listen to people who tell you smoking is not good for you, right? Yeah. So it's same, whatever affliction is strong in your mind, and you believe that without any mind training, to be of benefit for you, then when somebody says something else, you say, no, forget it. Yeah, if you're strong in anger and think you have to be angry and it's good to get angry, and then you accomplish things when you get angry, and then you come here to teaching on patience, you think, oh, this Namdak is completely nuts, right? Yeah,
right. Right. Yeah. That's the way it is.
The habituation pattern is strong, and then because of the habituation pattern, people believe that. And we see the more people get exposed on social media about something, people start to believe it, right? So that means the stronger the habituation pattern is, to do something the opposite becomes more and more difficult. And that's why it is difficult for people to contemplate emptiness or mind training in that regard, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Patience is my conclusion.
Yeah. Very good. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Geshe. Thank you very much. My question is a very, very basic one, actually, and I hope it isn't too simple, and I just feel that I have missed something completely in all this. And this is the fact that we've been hearing over many weeks, especially with the discussion about bodhicitta, and again with the mind training that we'll be doing now, that we have a basic assumption that we make that all other beings are like us, and that they want happiness and they don't want to suffer. And my very basic question is, on what evidence do we base that assumption?
On the evidence of what is the meaning of life.
Okay.
Yeah. So you can question what is the meaning of life, right? But then from a Buddhist perspective, we say people want happiness and don't want suffering. The basic principle of life comes to that. It's just the methodologies to accomplish those two aims in life are different. And the methodologies, some of them might be correct and some of them might be completely wrong. So that's
sorry.
Yeah.
That sounds to me like an aspect of faith or at
Okay.
least inference.
Yeah.
Maybe,
Yeah.
but without seeing any actual factual evidence, because obviously when we look at other people in the world, some people from our perspective look as though they're not suffering at all, that they actually actively enjoying inflicting bad things on other people and don't seem to be suffering at all. So I'm just wondering, is it, do we make this assumption from inference rather than what we can
Not
actually
only,
see?
I mean, inference is a part of it, but what about cause and effect relationships and responsibility? I mean, if you look at scientists like David Bohm and Colorado Valley, for example, who see the data of dependent origination right there, right?
Okay.
And because of understanding that data, that influences their mind, and then they talk about responsibility, and they talk about taking responsibility for each other, because there is a dependence, right? There's an interaction between people, and that dependence is there. That's a reality. And because of that dependence, they start to see the cause and effect relationships of states of consciousness, right? So then that becomes a kind of subjective aspect, because we talked about the first person, right? But most things in neuroscience, we talk about the third person. But even if you look at Anil Seth, who is a kind of very well-respected materialistic neuroscientist, and he just openly admits that, right? But his approach of subjective forms of consciousness is very clear, you know. So if you bring those different angles into the picture, then you have some empirical evidence of dependence and empirical and evidence of subjective experiences, and you know, empirical evidence of that people strive for happiness and not wanting suffering. It's only the methodology behind it is not always correct, you know. So that's kind of, I mean, what is happiness and what is suffering is a subjective thing, right? But we talk about these aspects. If you see Vocalo Ravelli, who is so compassionate because of seeing the physics of reality. So he says, instead of the Schrodinger's cat, he said, I don't like to say the cat is either dead or alive, because I don't like to say about dead cats. I like to say it's either asleep or awake. It's a very interesting statement from a physicist who has a very clear understanding of dependent origination, based on the physics, right? Based on the empirical aspects of science, you know. So if you take those two into account, then of course, eventually, in Buddhism, we use inference, because the Buddha, although is a scientist of the mind, or scientist of mind or mind science, right? But at those days, we didn't have fMRI scans, and we didn't have kind of measurements as we have at the moment. So you have to do it all with a kind of epistemology reasons. But if you see what we accomplished with epistemology and ontology, you know, using reasoning and come to conclusions. If Carlo Rovelli tells me I can't completely agree with this is what it says in the data, this is what it says in the theory of relations, then that means there is something quite correct. Yeah, in that aspect, you know. So if you take those different angles, then it starts to make sense, maybe, or not.
So essentially we get to that assumption by means of reasoning of dependent origination.
Yeah, and that can be based on empirical evidence, right?
Yeah, that's fair enough. Yeah, I understand that.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Welcome. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. About Tonglen. Yeah.
So you were saying sometimes that we're taking on smoke, we're taking on suffering, which is going into our negative karma.
Yeah. Ale. Okay. I mean, it's kind of, basically you cannot really take, technically speaking, you cannot really take suffering of others, right? Yeah. Only when high lamas of powerful concentration and when cause and effects are there, depending on karma of the individual, many factors have to be complete, right? So it's not easy, but it's just a mind training that we imagine doing so. We imagine in the form of smoke We take the suffering of others, for example. And then you imagine that smoke you inhale, and let's say you have a headache, then it dissolves into the headache, and then you think, by experiencing this headache, may these beings be free of all forms of suffering. May I experience their suffering in the form of this headache, right? So in that way, what happens on a karmic level, of course, in the fact relationship level, right, is that the headache is a result of negative karma that comes to ripening, right? Then you take the suffering of others, you imagine that, and that ripens in your headache. Then the headache is caused by negative karma created in relationship with harming others, right? And now you take away the suffering of others, and that dissolves into your headache. So actually, there's a double thing happening there. One aspect is your positive attitude to the sickness, and the other aspect is the ripening aspect of the sickness, or the ripening aspect of negative karma, I should say. And then the purification aspect, because your motivation is, may I experience this suffering in order for others not to experience any form of suffering, right? So that causes the purification to become much more profound, because the cause of the sickness is harming others, and now you do the opposite. You actually help others, right? So that's why it's a very profound aspect. Yeah, but it's just an imagination. But I mean, if you look in placebo, you know, it's very interesting. Most scientists, they don't really know how it works, but everybody accepts it, right? In any form of medication being developed, or you know, whatever medication is being developed, they always have control groups, and they always take placebo into account. So that means that the mind is very powerful. It's very powerful. So that's kind of also what we see here with the Tonglen practice. If you take karma into account, and then why negative karma has been created, and then now the way your attitude to it and to purify it, then it becomes a very powerful tool, right? Yeah. So there are many stories about, I mentioned last time, I think, right? About people curing sicknesses with Tonglen, right? Yeah. So this book I mentioned last time, no, that Meditation Saved My Life, you know, that book. Yeah, I mentioned here, I think, no, did I? Yeah, yeah. So that's very inspiring. It's not that you know, if you have a sickness, Namdak told me to do Tonglen, forget medication. You shouldn't do that, right? Just keep going with the medication, and then do you do the Tonglen on the side? You know, that's kind of very important, no? Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Mm. 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 Yeah. Mm. Mm. We have to. Mm-hmm. Mm. 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 Yeah. Mm. 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 Yeah, yeah. Mm. 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 Yeah. Mm. 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 The cycle of life. Aller en, yeah. Mm. 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 Aller. Mm. Aller. I mean, it's not that, you know, we have to be very careful and with karma, right? It's just kind of, it's not that this is, many people misunderstand it. It's not that it's this individual, the fault of that person because they have this karma or something like that. That's completely wrong, right? We all have this karma. We all have karma to be killed, to be raped. We have the karma, right? But just at the moment, we don't have the conditions present, you know? So that's kind of a nature of samsara, that nothing happens randomly. Everything is by the power of cause and effect relationships, right? So that's very important to understand, you know, that, you know, we all have very similar karma as people in the war zones, but at the moment, we just don't have the conditions present, right? Because other lifetimes it might happen or can happen. So that's kind of this overview of samsara to get a bigger understanding of samsara, right? So we often, when we see suffering and we feel uncomfortable by it and we get emotional, that's okay. But it's also important to have a more constructive form of compassion, because, you know, when we see these things, then it should enhance our compassion in a constructive way, not just kind of a pity feeling or something like that, to see what is the cause of all this suffering, and then have this courageous attitude, I'm going to do something about it, not just this one case, but every form of suffering, you know. That's kind of very important to put it in the bigger picture, right? Yeah, so yeah, in one way, if you look at those things, then you should try to either do Tonglen or try to generate this strong, courageous form of compassion. I'm going to stop this all, not just individual case, but of all sentient beings, right? And then that compassion is much more constructive, because if you just feel the suffering of others at that moment, right, then, you know, you might get depressed, or you might, when you say yourself, you lose your sleep, right? Yeah. There's nothing wrong with being emotional about these things. That's okay. But the mind behind it also has to move in a very constructive way forward. That this is all caused by karma of an individual, but also karma of others. It's a very complex system, right? It's not just one individual to be blamed, right? There's many. And of course, the people who harm are the most ones to be blamed, because they also, because their mind is full of afflictions and they make all these stupid, they do these stupid things. They also create causes for that in the future, right? So that's the kind of way why we should try to generate a compassion that is equal, you know, to different. It's not to justify violence, but the person who's sitting in a cafe having a nice drink, for example, that person also has karma, similar karma in his or her continuity of consciousness, right? So that means that the compassion we have should be based on understanding this underlying kind of cause for suffering of love and so underlying cause of suffering of afflictions and karma. As long as you have afflictions and karma, there's no escape, you know. So that's kind of a very important way to look at it in a very constructive way, you know, that it's good to develop compassion. It's good to feel, it's nothing wrong with feeling sad about it, you know, but don't get in a depression mode, or because you're helpless and you cannot do anything about it and you want to do something about it. Because then if you move in a more constructive way forward, okay, I cannot solve this situation or this suffering of this individual, but I can develop myself in the far future or near future. I can help more people. And then when I eventually get realizations, I can teach people and slowly make a connection, and I can help them to develop their minds, right? And to purify their minds and to move into the stages of liberation, you know, and enlightenment. So that's a vast vision is very important here, you know. Yeah. And then the aspect of suicide, I mean, yeah. Mm. Mm.
But this is really question my religion is like, if Dharma teaches us come decide to finish your life and move on. But imagine you are really in a situation you couldn't skip out.
Yeah. 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 So with I mean, like if you, that's the problem for us, right? We only think about this life often, right? But if you really think about lifetimes, you know, then to end one particular life, you know, because there's suffering, that doesn't imply there's no suffering in the next lifetime, right? That's quite clear. If we have suffering in this lifetime and we stop this, then does that mean you without suffering in the next lifetime? Probably not, right? So that means that it's just a temporary aspect, right? Just a temporary thing if you escape this suffering, but it doesn't mean you escape all suffering, right? So it's much more constructive to think about a long-term stopping of suffering than just, although it might be very intense, temporary sufferings, you know? Because if it's particularly from a karmic perspective, if there's a suffering happening of a situation like this or a sickness or whatsoever, and then by experiencing that, you also purify negative karma, right? So then if you go through that and then you have purified this negative karma and then die, or you die in the middle of it and there's still some karma left, you know? So that's kind of, it's not easy, right? These aspects are not easy because we look at lifetimes, and that's for us very difficult to look at. But if you think about lifetimes, then your mind shifts, and then there's sadness, there's compassion when you see these things, but there's straight away also a constructive mind that understands the suffering of samsara and it wants to do something about it and creates causes to do something about it. Because if you create causes to do something about it, you move forward, right? If you just have sadness and you don't create cause to do something about it, then you're just stuck, right? So that's kind of what we in Buddhism we try to try to look at it from an angle of it's sad and we cannot help this person or this situation at the moment, but we can develop our mind in a way that on the long term we can do much more about these things, right? Because we can have temporary things, but ultimate benefit is more important, right? So that people, whoever is involved in the problem, either the victim or the person who create the problems, right? It's all dependent cause and conditions, you know, and the people who harm is also very sad because they create so much suffering for themselves, you know.
Yeah, I don't really hate them.
Yeah.
I was considering like, you know, we were seeing, but this is come to another question too. I was questioning myself. Do we really have to use this system, the circle, the sixth circle,
Yeah.
to learn like so many lives to become enlightened? Do we
Yeah.
really need to suffer so many things? Have you ever questioned like that too?
Many times. Yeah. 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 I mean, that's one aspect. If you see that's an aspect of samsara, right? Then your urge to get out of it becomes stronger, right? And that's constructive, you know? If you just think, oh yeah, I have to go this again and again, that by itself is not constructive. But if you see this is scary stuff, I don't want this. And then you generate the mind, now I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to train my mind and I'm going to study and practice Lam Rim. I want to get out of this. And then it's very constructive. you know, and then then you do your daily motivation of the day, you do your daily contemplation, you study, your meditations, and then you motivate yourself constantly, right? So that's kind of the constructive way to look at it. You know? That's very important. Yeah. Yeah. Otherwise, you're just stuck in the same things over and over. You have to think, okay, I'm going to do something about it. And in one way, be so fortunate, you know, to be able to have met these teachings and can do something about it. And then also, then you can take it as a responsibility, right? Okay, I have this incredible opportunity. I have the interest, I have the time. I can develop myself. In order to help all the others, I have to do this. And then you move very constructively forward, right? That's quite important. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Thank
Okay,
you
yeah,
so much.
yeah. Because everywhere, you know, like when was it, last week? We just go for a walk. We meet two people, and one person came from a hospice, and his daughter had two little children. Daughter was having cancer and passing away in a few days' time. So it's all there. All need to service everywhere, you know. So then, if you see that, then instead of just being sad about it, then we should try to move the mind in a constructive way forward and see, okay, this is samsara, and we have to get out of it, and have to help others to get out of it, you know. And then it's a very constructive way forward, because if you do not develop your mind, it will remain the same, right? So if you develop your mind, you do something about it, so that you actually do something constructively, right? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Reason. Yeah. Reason. Yeah.
People online here.
Ale. No, the online the online people need a mic, but yeah, I can repeat the question for people online. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was wondering
If it's not too long. Yeah.
when you do any kind of interpretation, how do you prioritize which kind of
Ale. Yeah.
say, for instance, you have magic, and would you, if those kind of things occur, then would you consider, oh, my life is most of this kind of karma, so I should probably focus
on that. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So the question was that if you do purification practice, which kind of negative karma created in the past you mostly focus upon, right? So if you have a financial problem, then would you focus upon the negative karma created in relation with this problem, right? So yeah, I mean, it's just the financial problem or whatever suffering we experience is a temporary thing, right? So we have created so many forms of negative karma. So generally speaking, what we do and what you see in the purification prayers, for example, is if you can combine it around the 10 non-virtuous activities, you know? Yeah. So then if you go to the 10 non-virtuous activities and then do your prayers in general, and then you can specify if you want to with whatever problem you're facing, right? But if you just only focus on one problem and you do purification practice, or you focus on all different negative karmas being created and you do purification practice, then the second one is more profound because it purifies more, right? Yeah. And we have created all kinds of negative karma. So then when we do purification practice, is better to have the general, as we normally do, the negativities of body, speech, and mind, and then individual aspects, as you just mentioned, you can do on the side, right? Yeah. So with negative karma, because we don't remember negative karmas we created in the past, right? So that's why it's better to do a general kind of aspect of and you can take examples into account, right? But in relation with, for example, the 10 non-virtuous is always been advised, right? Yeah.
I mean, I'm aware that we need to do all of them, but if your life is repeating something, one should do more than the others, or it doesn't work out.
You can do, but karma is very complex, right? So it's very difficult to say, oh, okay, this negative karma is caused by that and that and that. It's often a combination of many things, right? So that's why we generally do a kind of a general aspect. But then imagine what kind of negativities you've done in relation with with stealing, for example, if it's a financial issue, right? It's one of the negatives of the body, right? So you can think about those aspects in particular, or a little bit more. Emphasis on it. It's worth doing it, but don't don't only focus on that. Just focus the other aspects as well, you know. Yeah. But sometimes there's kind of purification practices when you just focus first on killing, then you focus on stealing, for example, right? So there are purification practices where you focus on one particular activity, you purify at that time. But then in the whole kind of purification practice, let's say you do 1 minute on purification of the body and 1 minute, 1 minute on killing, 1 minute on stealing, for example. So you can do 1 minute on killing and 2 minutes on stealing in this case. Yeah. Yeah. And then move on to the other ones as well. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So let's, stop there. You know, already 37:73. No, 37 minutes over time. No, we always stop 8:30, right? Okay. Okay, so let's dedicate this courageous kind of dedication of I'm going to do it. You know, that's a very constructive way forward, right? To move your mind in that direction. Yeah, so try to, and then you accomplish something in the long term. That's very important. Okay, so dedicate the dedication. Yeah. Dagi jin sabe yewa di tendang dowa gunda gambe. Geba Jason Lozan Daba Yi Dembe Ningbo Rindo Zelje. May the glorious Guru's life be long and stable. May all beings experience space of happiness. And may I and others, without exception, accumulate merit and purify negativities. And may be blessed to quickly attain Buddhahood. Den Jin Dan Jiang Yun Yang. Den Je Gya Bela Jiang. Raz Bon. Sunde nyu me ze ba ji je da pe de nyu jo jan jo san jo rin bo je ma ye pa na gi gu ji ge ba nyam ba me ba yang go ne gong de ba wa jo to ni ta wa rin bo na ye pa na gi gu ji ge ba nyam ba me ba go ne gong de ba wa. Sure. Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, thank you.